will recognise him from, and remains an ambassador there as well. So it gives me great pleasure to get Dixon up on stage. Give him a big round of applause, please. By the way, is that your Tesla outside? It is. You figure that the parking tickets are cheaper than the advertising and sponsorship. You got it. Right. Hi, I'm Dixon Jones. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for coming and coming here after. Are we ready to geek? Yes. Yay! Okay. Come to the wrong place. I know nothing. Entities and knowledge graphs is what we're going to be talking about today. I used to be known for links, and now I'm known for entities, and it's all changed, and I've had to relearn it all. Entities and knowledge graphs we're going to be talking about, and really we're going to be talking about how topics are replacing keywords in search, in everything in search. It seems to have been quite a big theme of the conference today, and the reason we're involved is because Links has built its technology from the ground up around writing a knowledge graph. And we're going to be talking about Google and entity SEO, and how SEO can be changed by understanding entities. So we've got to start with the one question: what is an entity? And everyone gets, until they get it, they get really scared with this. Don't really know, to be honest. I don't quite know what it is. It's not that difficult, really, at least in my head. And I'm a simple man. An entity is really just a record or a topic or an article in a knowledge base. That's all it is, really. So this is an entity. There we go. Pilsner. It's an entity. It's an article in Wikipedia, and that is, by all definitions, really an entity within Wikipedia. That means that Wikipedia is a knowledge graph, sort of, or a knowledge base. It's actually a knowledge graph because they connect everything together with internal links a lot, so I call that a knowledge graph. This is also a knowledge graph, sort of. So this is, I actually saw this before lockdown in a local pub, and it's a map of beer, and German lager is therefore an entity within the knowledge graph of beer on this chart here. So really, that's all there is to the concept of entities. So, as I say, Links has been building out our own knowledge graph because we kind of figure this is going to be important for SEOs as we move forward. So this is an example knowledge graph from, I think I can dive in, I think this is our own website. So our own website is made up of topics like search engine optimization, marketing, keyword research, web search, right, and stuff like that. These are the important topics on the inside, and the outside ones are slightly less important. Actually, this is actually around the phrase content optimization tool. These are the topics that I am talking about in my content, and these are the topics I'm not talking about in my content that are related. So building a knowledge graph is, you can do it with a database, you can do it with a spreadsheet, you can do it with Brain 2.0, best tool on the planet. But basically, it's all about knowledge graphs and building out entities and topics and things that you should be talking about if you're trying to be ranked for a particular phrase. So, entity SEO, well, what is entities? Well, what is the problem first that entities are trying to solve? Why is it all of a sudden important? Well, actually, it's not all of a sudden, because of course this all started when Google bought Freebase, which was 8 years ago, was it now? So they've been at it for a while. But the problem that entities are trying to solve is if you've got all these web pages on the top here, so this is the internet in websites. I'm a graphic designer by trade, obviously. You can tell by my expert designs. The knowledge graph itself gives us of entities or of articles, gives us a single point of truth for a search engine. So instead of having 1,000 web pages on how to tie a bow tie or what is Pilsner, they can have one bit of information, and then they can draw information from all of these web pages. So the knowledge graph is a list of entities or things, but not pages on the internet particularly. But it will, of course, talk to those pages on the internet, and those pages will inform the knowledge graph and inform the entities within it, and that's great. However, it also gives us another problem that they couldn't really solve just by having web pages and indexing just web pages, because as soon as you've got a direct access to a single point of truth, you can start adding information from other data sources. So you can sit there and say, right, I'm just going to add the lyrics of any particular song in here, or I can manually put in data like you've got a manual penalty, or you can put in internal data from your organisation. If you're a large company, then you may be able to augment that information with information that's personal to yourself. So there's a lot of things that you can do with a knowledge graph that you can't do if you're just disparately trying to index all of the web pages without any central point of truth. And of course, if all these websites go offline now, as long as the knowledge graph is there, they've still got the information retained. Could call it theft, of course. But we'll leave that for another philosophical debate. The challenge for entity SEO, though, is really not, part one is making sure you press the buttons right, is making sure that you can get information into the knowledge graph, you can inform the knowledge graph, you can influence the knowledge graph, but the real challenge, of course, is getting that information back, or getting the user back out of Google's domain, or whoever owns that knowledge graph's domain, back to your ecosystem, back to things you can control. Otherwise, you ain't ever going to get them to buy anything. So why is the move from a keyword-based model to an entity-based model so important for Google for search engines? Well, one reason is scale. If you think about all the pages on the internet, it's fine. There's loads and loads of pages on the internet. If you think about a record, a database of all the pages on the internet, that's trillions and trillions of records. However, when you turn that round and you pick out all the ideas that people are talking about, it's actually only tens, hundreds of billions of ideas. So there are a lot less ideas in the world than there are web pages in the world. So the scale has now got plenty big enough to swamp the idea of indexing things by page. Much better to index by concept or idea. And that means that your database is going from trillions of records to hundreds of billions of records. Secondly, entities help Google go deeper with less repetition. So they can sit there and choose their single point of truth, and they can still have opinions, and they can say, well, here's an opinion over here, and here's an opinion over here, but they can go deeper into an idea and turn it into a sort of electronic encyclopedia, if you like. But that gives us our first opportunity with schema to help inform and direct the knowledge graphs, because now we can start writing about schema, and if you're scared of schema, it's really easy. So this is about a thing. This page of content of Dixon Jones is about a thing called the internet, and in case you don't know what that is, Mr. Search Engine, here's the Wikipedia page for the internet. This thing is about Googlebot, and if you don't know what that is, here's the page for Googlebot. So schema is really just a machine way of writing very simple statements. And that means that these mentions automatically mean that these topics that are mentioned on the page are less important than these main concepts. So what we're doing here, or trying to do here, is to help turn Google's or a search engine's understanding from implicitly assuming what the main page is about, to explicitly saying, well, this is what the main page is about. Another thing that is so pressing is that words vary between languages, but topics don't. So if you've got 100 pages in 100 separate languages, it's quite hard to have a retrieval engine that can disambiguate all of those kind of concepts if they're in multiple different languages. Whereas if those topics they're all talking about the same topics but in different languages, then perhaps you can store all the topics, and the Notoriously and the Eiffel Tower are the same concept regardless of the language that it was really described in. So there's some real scalability options for a large search engine there as well. So what does that mean for us as SEOs? The first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need some algorithms to convert entities and convert text into entities and topics. Because we as search engine marketers have been used to writing great stories and hoping they will.com, and now we've got to write connected topics and ideas, and we've got to figure out what topics we've got to write in the right order if we're going to really impress a search engine, and the search engine is going to see that we're an authority around the subject matter. So we need these algorithms. And fortunately for me, actually, this came offline last week, which is Google's cut and paste demo API. So there you could cut and paste text into the demo and press a button. It would run their natural language processing algorithm, and it would show you all the underlying entities. Now that's just come offline. The API is still out there, but it was a free demo. IBM Watson have a brilliant one, but never fear, because of course Inmix has one free on inmix.net's homepage. Just put the URL in and off you go. The interesting thing about Google's one is that really they actually return a lot less entities than most people that have used the tool think. So here, this tool I call the virtual reality page, and it's talking about an entity of Sega virtual reality, which links back to a Wikipedia article, and NASA that links back to a virtual reality, to a Wikipedia article. But some of these other things are not entities, because we've got virtual reality, virtual reality, virtual reality, virtual reality. We've got 4 different things which are saying all the same things. They're not linked to any entity. We've not identified them as an entity. So there is a disconnect between what people have been thinking this is doing and what we consider at least an entity when you go and play with the actual API. So what have been doing for nearly 2 years now is every week we've been choosing an industry sector. We've been running our own natural language processing algorithm, which is designed to extract all of the entities on a page, and Google's NLP, which tells us whichever entities they have on a page, and we've been tracking how many of their entities are repeated. And in average, this is a bit old now, but you can go to inmix.net/ oh, I don't know, it's somewhere in the drop downs anyway, and you can see that on average, they're only reporting about 15% of the entities that we see on a typical page. And that's an interesting thing for SEOs, because as SEOs, our job is to tell a search engine what entities are important. So if we're using Google's NLP API, sorry, she was waving a fan, I thought she was telling me to stop or something like that. Am I making it hot then? No. I'm going to get in so much trouble, I'm so sorry, Phil. Please don't tweet that and say I've been bad, I'm sorry. I'll just stop and pick myself up now. Right. So Google does not report all the entities on a page. So if we're going to just rely on Google's natural language processing algorithm, we are already 85% behind what we should be as SEOs. So we need our own. So this is now the actionable part of the system. Entity SEO, in a nutshell, or an analogy, or a metaphor, is really turning tumbleweed-type websites. A website that is full of stories that intertwine, that connect with each other, but it's very difficult to see where the authority for any particular topic or idea is. So this kind of idea, same desert, different cactus, where all of a sudden the ideas are very, very clear, and you can tell where the authority is for this entity, this entity, and this entity, and this entity. This is the idea. We're trying to connect the dots and make it very clear to a search engine where the authority is. And we do that really by firstly understanding all the entities that we need to talk about, decide which ones are our money terms, really, and make sure that all the focus is heading towards those. So we set those up as our targets. We make sure that our schema, our about schema, is on those pages. Probably we don't even have about schema on all those stories about, I went to BrightonSEO last week and here are all the people I met. That's very interesting stuff for Google to crawl. But I do want to mention that I talked about entity SEO, link over to the entity page, or link over to the SEO page. So what we need to do is to take those ideas, turn your website from one of a bundle of ideas and concepts and ideas to one that's very clear and entity focused. So what we do is we associate pages with topics, and a topic being something that has a direct hit with Wikipedia. I know Google's got its own knowledge graph, but Wikipedia is easier for me, and it's easier for people to understand, and it's also open source. Then we link the topics to those pages, basically. So any other time that you're talking about those topics, then in the body text we can then link those ideas using the same natural language processing through to the main landing page of the topic. Now I know Natalie's going to talk a lot more about link building in just a minute, so I won't go on to that too much. But then, taking our Pilsner example that we had at the start, that means that I can have a look at all of the websites that are ranking for the phrase German lager. I can run a natural language processing, or you can run a natural language processing algorithm over each of those bits of content, extract out all of the entities, You can't do it with one or two sites, you need to do it with a bunch of sites because you need to find some priorities. So you need to understand that you need to be able to work out the lager and Germany and beer are much more important than customers, malt and internet, for example. But you can then build yourself a hierarchy of topics that are important to Google for the sites that are already ranking for that particular phrase. And once you've got those entities, you can then compare them with a gap analysis with your own content and see where you're missing something else. So in this particular case, the website that we've got hasn't talked about hops. And if I want to get higher on the search engines, it turns out that maybe I should talk about hops, because that turns out to be semantically quite relevant to the search query German lager. Something I wouldn't have known unless I'd been able to do that. You can do all this by spreadsheets and write things down quicker with the machine. Hops, so we can then tie that back to a specific entity on Wikipedia. We can also see from here, if you wanted to talk more about hops, what context I might want to do it. So you can sit there and say, right, if I'm a food beverages website, if I'm a grocery site, maybe I want to talk about these kind of things. Whereas if I'm a health website, maybe I want to talk about, okay, I'm not saying the breast enlargement supplement is actually appropriate there, sorry. God, it's gone twice. What a double bombshell, sorry about that. Yeah, so the different topics we can talk about there will relate to the actual business model that we've got in place. So, the point is that linking ideas is better than linking words together. So, from this example, we can sit there and say, okay, I want to talk about hops, and I want to talk about hops because hops provide the flavour, and the flavour affects the beer style, for example. Or blonde is about the colour orange, and colour orange is the colour of the witchcraft ale, for example. So linking ideas is very, very effective in SEO, in entity SEO. But not all links between pages are created equal. So, you know, I still have my Majestic Ambassador hat on, and then we can. Majestic does a very good job of separating out the different sort of links from other websites or other web pages into topics and categories, and also it tells you how high up the page they are as well. They're not all created equal, but internal links you can control very much yourself, and so that helps. So, my last 3 minutes, I've got a couple of tips and takeaways. Firstly, build your website as if it was a miniature knowledge graph, if you can. I mean, if you've got a website already, don't just scrap it, for goodness sake. But moving forward, think about entities and think about ways of correlating your content with entities, or at least two entities that have an edge case that define the problem. Because Google is building knowledge graphs around topics and ideas, and the more you can map yours to their kind of topics and ideas, the more you're going to align with their processes in the future. So build your site as if it's a miniature knowledge graph. Secondly, if you can, build your content pages around that knowledge graph created by the top pages for a given phrase. So what you can do, if I was a business starting again right now, I'd take my BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal phrase, and I'd put it into a system, see all of the entities that are coming out of that system, whether I'm looking at my existing topic or all my competitors, and putting them all together, and then start to build around the topics that are of common themes, rather than saying, right, you know, I'm going to do it by geographically or something else. And then create landing pages with web page schema, and focus all of that content towards that. So internally link ideas, not keywords by the way, then link the ideas to the right pages so it becomes clear what is the right area of authority within your website for the topic or entity that you're trying to relate. I hope that makes some sense. If it didn't, I have tried to put it into an ebook which came out last week, Entity SEO, you can get it on Amazon. I tried to make it free, they wouldn't let me do that, money grabbing something or others. So I'm afraid it has to cost £1.79 or something like that. And if you want to try and links, that's free too. I think that's it. If you want the talk, please email talk@dixonjones.com. I'll send through the slides and also the version that I did whilst I was preparing for this without all my faux pas, which I apologise. Thank you very much for your time. Good.